Test, test, one, two, test, one, two. What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new Sunday Debacle. Hopefully, you guys all doing good. You see me, I'm ready, happy with Ducky's shirt because we're getting past the winter. And so things are going to start looking ducky from here on out. That's why I got the shirt on. So, anyway, I hope everybody's doing good. You know, everybody's not letting the madness get to them, the craziness that's going on. Um, and I am going to bring it back to music because that's what I like to do. You know, when we discuss music, people tend to have a good time. They tend to smile, they relax. Even when you get into arguments about music, they're not violent, visceral, angry arguments. You know, they're fun debates. And thank you, Amanda. Thank you, honey, for being here. My wife, my piece is here. So I know that I'm gonna be off to a good show. If you anybody else is here, do me a favor, hit the reaction button. Let me know that you're here and that you exist, that you are you're participating in this stuff. Yo, what's up, Rich? My man, Rich Harris. Um, uh, from back in my Sienna days. I'm glad that you're here, brother. I appreciate it. Um, Everybody else, make sure you hit the like and let me know that you're here. Leave a comment. Either way, I want to have some fun with this. So, what I wanted to talk about is essential 70s albums. So I saw a list recently, and it had the top 10 70s albums, right? And so, of course, it had the usual suspects. It had the Eagles, Hotel California. It had Led Zeppelin 4. It had uh, it had Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. Oh, Sienna lost. Boo! Was it a conference game? Not a conference game. Was it a tournament game? Let me know there. Rich just telling me that our our alma mater lost. So boo in basketball. But anyway, so we all know about the usual suspects, right? When we talk albums of the 70s, right? Dark Side of the Moon, which I really wanted to put on this list, but in all, okay, good. It was just a regular season game. In all honesty, it was an album that I couldn't put on, not on this list. We're talking about the other albums of the 70s. A lot of people know. A lot of you guys who are paying attention know. Um, I have it. The albums are gonna be listed as classic rock, but I'll be honest with you. A bunch of them, quite a few of them, were punk. And the sad part is because now punk is considered classic rock. Yeah, I know. Some of you guys are like, no, get the hell out of here. No, yeah, it is. It's considered classic rock. The Ramones' first album, their debut album, was in that list of the top 10 essential albums of the 70s. So yeah, so I got my list here, and as I'm going down this list, I'm not gonna go in order. I just listed them 10 to 1, but that's not the order that they're in. Um, it's just order. Um, it's just an order that I put them in, and I'll throw in some special mentions as I go on with this. I want to take up the hour and 15 minutes. Again, if you guys are just tuning in, make sure that you click on that. Oh shit, Mike Montaigne is here, ladies and gentlemen. You guys don't know who the hell he is, but I do. Mike's from another of my my Sienna buddies. So here we go. You guys ready? These are the 10 other essential albums from 70s classic rock. And remember, like I said, there's gonna be a bunch of punk albums in here, believe it or not. And we're gonna start off with number 10, represented up on the wall right there. Right there. The Sex Pistols. Never mind the Bullocks. Here comes the Sex Pistols, 1977. This was the album, wasn't the first punk album. Sex Pistols weren't the first punk band signed to a major record label, but they defined punk. the entire the attitude, the movement, uh, the songs, everything about them defined punk at the time. And we can talk about the Ramones and what they did, but punk as we know it, or as we've come to know it, really gets going with the Sex Pistols. Um, and so, Never Mind the Bullocks has to be one of the essential '70s albums that you ought to listen to. Um, it's amazing how, in retrospect, if you listen to it today, it's not it's not as provocative as it would have been in '77. You know, especially songs like "God Save the Queen" and "Pretty Vacant." Those songs really, yeah, they're not as shocking um, in 2024, but in '77 they were out there, man. They really, really were. So that's my number 10 album. My number 9 album, it's by a Beatle. Beatles broke up in 1970. George Harrison puts out um, a 3 album set, All Things Must Pass, and becomes the first Beatle who goes solo and has a number 1 hit, right? My Sweet Lord. Uh, this is a significant album because the Beatles, let let's put it out on the table. The Beatles were John and Paul. Hey, what's up, Brian? John and Paul, John Lennon, Paul McCartney. That was the Beatles. They wrote all the hits. And many people talk about how George Harrison had um uh, had such talent, but was being stifled and being uh, forced down due to McCartney and Lennon. And we saw flashes of Harrison's brilliance with the Beatles with the songs, um, "Good Day Sunshine," not "Good Day Sunshine," excuse me, the songs, oh my God, "Yesterday," no, not "Yesterday" either. Something in the way she moves, you know, songs like that, where he had some of the Beatles' biggest hits were done by George Harrison. What's going on there, Joe? Joe Sheedy, guy who I served on in the Navy with. Him and I were on subs together. Just checking in. Appreciate you. And make sure everybody that you give me a reaction so that I can keep an eye on how many people have actually stopped by. So anyway, George Harrison being kind of stifled had a bunch of songs um, that he wanted to put on Beatle albums, and the Beatles were like, nah, we're good. And so what happens? What's up, Mike? So what happens? George Harrison turns around, releases them on this 3 album set, and it blows up. All of a sudden, everybody gets to really understand what George Harrison was about. And of course, capped off with the number 1 hit, "My Sweet Lord." So that's number 9. What we're talking about for people who are just checking in, we're talking about 10 other essential '70s classic rock albums. So these are albums. I saw a list that had the top 10 essential albums. I was like, yep, yep, yep. But where were all the other albums? They weren't on this list. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to put them, and I'm not going to include Zeppelin 4 and the usual suspects. By the way, anytime I've got something that relates to the person, I'm going to point it out. So over there is the Time magazine cover of announcing George Harrison's passing. So that's right there. So all things must pass, and all Beatles must pass. And there's George Harrison. Number 8, the 1971 release of Alice Cooper, "Love It to Death." This is significant. I don't have anything. Oh, not to lie, I do have some Alice stuff right over there. You can see Alice figurine and autograph box cover of $1 Billion Babies. But uh, Alice Cooper's '71 release, "Love It to Death," is where we start to get theatrical Alice. Okay, this is an album that's essential when you start discussing theater rock. When you start discussing, this is the album that leads to the Kisses, it leads to the Marilyn Mansons, And anybody who puts on a show, anybody who puts on a show, because now Alice, who dealt in his early albums were a little more psychedelic, um, really decides to go off here. This is also this is where we start to see the birth of Alice Cooper the character versus Alice Cooper the band. Because remember, Alice Cooper was a band. The lead singer was Vince Furrer, or however you pronounce his last name. Okay. He eventually becomes Alice Cooper. He transforms into Alice Cooper, the shock rocker. And unlike a lot of other people, where when he became Alice Cooper, a lot of other bands, he did something that was really cool, and it shows to what kind of guy he is. Um, he pays the rest of the bands for the use of that name. The band was named Alice Cooper. He becomes Alice Cooper. Um, he obviously starts to pull away from the band. By the mid 70s, he's releasing albums as Alice Cooper, single act versus Alice Cooper band. But he continues to pay the band royalties for the use of that name. That right there was kind of telling you, the kind of guy that he was. So that's number 8 on my list of top 10, no, excuse me, of 10 other essential albums from 70s classic rock. And if you guys got some albums you want to discuss, throw them up there. I'll tell you if they're on my list. If they are on the top 10 list, I'll mention them, but then we're going to move on. We're not going to really discuss them because, again, all of those top 10 albums get discussed to death, and even some of these will. But I just wanted to give them a moment to shine. All right, so that was number 8, Alice Cooper, Love It to Death. Number 7, the 1976 release of the self-titled album by Boston. When you talk about a near perfect album, one of the most incredible first album releases, that album is up there. It is almost flawless. Brad Delp's vocals were amazing, still are amazing. How that guy is not on any list of the most incredible rock vocalists of all time, I have no idea. His range was amazing. Matter of fact, I think it was yesterday when I posted on Facebook. I posted the isolated vocals for More Than a Feeling, so you guys could hear it, because I've become obsessed lately with that first album, and I've always loved that song. So number 7, Boston, and again, their debut album, self-titled. Number 6, Pink Floyd. One of my favorite bands, right there, as a matter of fact, is a symbol that's autographed by Nick Mason, drummer of Pink Floyd. And I'm not going to obviously, Dark Side of the Moon was one of their top 10 albums of the 70s. I'm not going to, give that its mention, its due. The Wall, on the other end of the 70s, also an essential listen. It could be Pink Floyd's pinnacle, was when they released that album. But I'm going to go with the 1975 release by Pink Floyd, a dedication to one of their founders, Syd Barrett, and it's Wish You Were Here. Some incredible songs like obviously the title track, Wish You Were Here, Have a Cigar, which is one of my favorite Floyd songs, and the 178-minute Shine On You Crazy Diamond, not that long, but you get the drift, which is their dedication to Syd Barrett. Sid Barrett was one of the original founders of Pink Floyd, who, when they were doing their psychedelic music in the 60s, um, leaned too much into the psychedelic stuff and ended up going crazy. Um, and they say, it's funny, they say as they were recording this album that this crazy looking bald guy looked like a homeless person, kind of just wandered into the studio while they're recording this album, and they look up and it's Sid Barrett, and they're like, wow, and you know they have some kind of incoherent conversation with the guy because he's whacked out on uh, where he's got brain damage. I don't know if he's still whacked out at this point, if he's still doing drugs when they're recording this album, but he's got brain damage. He's so spaced out that there was no recovering for him. Uh, and so they have some kind of incoherent conversation. Then he just kind of shuffles off, and it's kind of a, you know, it's a sad story when you read about it, because if you knew how essential he was to the band when they started. So I'm going to give you my so 10-6 real quick. Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bullets. George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. 8 is Alice Cooper, Love It to Death. 7 is Boston, their debut album. And 6 is Pink Floyd's 1975 release, Wish You Were Here. We're going to talk about the other 5 here in a minute, but I want to bring up some stuff. I want to hear from you guys. What are some of the albums you think I should be talking about here? They had to have come out in the 70s, okay? And it has to be, at this point, considered classic rock. So we'll talk about jam bands. We'll talk about hard rock. We'll talk about we can talk about singer-songwriters, punk, and an early new wave if it came out before 1980. Okay, I want you guys to mention a couple of your albums. Of course, if you guys are tuning in right now, do me a favor, hit the reaction button, give it a like, a love, angry face. I don't care. Just let me know that you're here. Okay, and let me know what are some of these albums. And when we're talking albums, you know, there's a wide range of stuff. That actually made my list. So I'm not going to talk about that right now. Oh wait, Kill Live. No, Kill Live. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought it was. That made my list. We'll talk about that one here in a little bit. But you know, there's so many incredible albums from the 70s because there's so many incredible genres. Okay, when we're talking about what's considered classic rock now, we could mention bands like Hall and Oates. We can mention bands like the Grateful Dead. We can mention bands like Joy Division. Joy Division's first album, offhand, I think it's called Pleasure Moments, came out in '79. It's the album that many people will give credit to for the birth of goth music, and that's considered classic rock now. Some people say, no, it's not, it's punk, or no, it's not, it's new wave, or no, it's not. No, at this point, it's classic rock. It's still considered rock, and just by the fact of its age. It's, you know, it's 40, 45 years old. It's classic rock. Sorry, guys. You know, Meet the Knack by the Knack. Dire Straits debut album. You know, Molly Hatchet, Flirting with Disaster. You know, Leonard Skinner's Second Helping. These are all considered classic rock. Allman Brothers, Deep Purple, early Judas Priest, early AC/DC. Any AC/DC with Brian Scott. All of this is Bon Scott, not Brian, Bon Scott. All of this is considered punk. I mean, not punk, excuse me, it's considered classic rock. The Dead Boys, Live, Snotty, and Loud. I can guarantee you, Ike, that if I mentioned 5,000 albums, I never would have came up with that one. Give me a quick description as to why you think that's a classic, that's an essential classic rock album that needs to be listened to. We got Talking Heads, we got Lou Reed, we got bands like Television, Marquee Moon. That's a didn't make the list that I put together, but that's definitely an album that you need to hear. And that's New York punk, more avant-garde, um, like Talking Heads and like Blondie, that kind of punk versus the Sex Pistols, more in your face, more political um, punk, more angry at the establishment punk, so to speak. So again, make sure that you're hitting the reaction button. I'm sorry that I keep saying that a lot, but I just got to make sure that people hit it so that I know that they're here. I know that they're watching because a lot of you guys um, won't do anything in the comments. So I don't know who's actually watching this until I get to check to see the reactions later on. And I'm like, oh shit, so and so checked out. Rumors by by Fleetwood Mac. So John, um, I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but just to let you know what I'm coming up with is uh, I read an article that said that the top 10 essential 70s classic rock albums. And I'm trying to stay away from the ones that were on the top 10. Rumors was one of them. Uh, Led Zeppelin 4, um, Hotel California. These were all these albums that were right up there. So I'm trying to stay away from the Dark Side of the Moon was another one. Okay, so when you say so, Ike, when you say that they were what American punk was all about, are you talking about in the vein of the MC5, that kind, or more like again more like the Ramones, which is punk, but a different type of punk. You know, I always look at punk as two things. You got the American punk, which to me was the Ramones, and then you had UK punk, or punk from yeah UK punk, which to me was the Sex Pistols. So that's where they fall in. Okay, so if we're ready to move on, back to my list of the 10 other essential albums of 70s classic rock. For those of you who just tuning in, let me give you the 10 through 6, which I already listed. 10 was the Sex Pistols, never mind the Bullocks. 9 was George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. 8 was Alice Cooper's Love It to Death. 7 was Boston, self-titled. And 6 was Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here. And what I'll do is at some point I'm going to I'll type this list and put it on Facebook. I want you guys, if you haven't heard these albums, I want you guys to listen to them. Listen to the whole album, okay, and see what you think, or just leave a comment when I do the Facebook post to see what you guys think about it. So let me see. So Joe says blues on how late do you play albums, which was on the second. I don't understand what you're saying there, Joe. Is the name of the album Blues by David Gronberg? I'm not sure. And then more of a cross between the Ramones and MC5. Oh, I gotta give a listen to that album. All right, so let's move on. Number 5, represented, God damn it, right there by the Hat and the Whip. The 1978 release by the band out of Akron, Ohio, Devo, and Are We Not Men? Question mark. Answer, we are Devo. This was where this band, led by Mark Mothersbaugh and Gerald Castle, bring to America their philosophy of de-evolution, which essentially is saying that society is de-evolving, and that's what their music it supposedly is geared to represents. They call their fans mutant. Oh, blues is a genre. Okay, I got it, Joe. They call their fans, mutants, and they made that famous appearance in the third season of Saturday Night Live, singing their version of Satisfaction. It's it's amazing, and we all know them for the radiation suits. Matter of fact, right above the on the air sign is a piece of one of their radiation suits that I ripped off of Mark Mothersburg when I saw them in 2009. um, the album is amazing. It's uh most famous track is Jocko Homo, which is a song that goes, are we not men? We are Devo. Are we not men? Devo. That song is off of that album. So is their version of Satisfaction. This album really starts to kick off what eventually will become new wave. Um, it's hard to really define. It's not really punk or post punk. At the time, it really becomes its own genre, and actually, even as we call it new wave today, it's still not even really new wave. There's this period in the late '70s where you get bands like Devo, and Adam and the Ants, and the B-52s that all will eventually form the base of new wave. Um, but the best thing to call them is all post punk. It's that music that came out after the punk of the mid '70s, but it didn't really fall anywhere. If that kind of makes sense. But give that album a listen to. It is an amazing, amazing, amazing album. Number 4 from 1976, and I already mentioned it. Yeah, Uncontrollable Urge. I was thinking they did that song real quick. Devo played that song on the 50th anniversary of um of Saturday Night Live when they appeared there, and my wife was laughing at me because I kept going yeah 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 yeah. Dun, 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 dun. I just look at it and go yeah 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 yeah. Which is a central part of the song. So I can't wait to go see him. We got tickets already to go see him up in D.C. They don't tour the East Coast as much anymore. As a matter of fact, I don't think they've done like they haven't done a show in DC since 2009, which is when I saw them. Anyway, going back to number 4, um, like I said, Ike mentioned them. They were my first concert in Madison Square Garden. They also I got to see their very last show at their 50th anniversary, also at Madison Square Garden. But this was their first live album, and I'm talking about Kiss Alive. Now, up until that point, Kiss, like a lot of other bands, were having trouble crossing over. They had a bunch of studio albums, or a few studio albums, um, some great songs, but for some reason they weren't connecting. And the reason they weren't connecting is because where you really got into Kiss was on their live shows. And so they figured the best thing that they can do uh, is to record a live album. And so in 1976, we got Kiss Alive, and the band blew up. The band became the hottest band in the world, which is how they always started the show. You wanted the best, you got the best. The hottest band in the world, Kiss. They became just that. That album went on to to incredible heights. Take the band to incredible heights. Led to comic books and TV shows and um, gold records and platinum albums and world tours and the Kiss Army, which has made this band marketing wise, one of the most financially successful bands of all time. As Gene Simmons, um, a marketing genius that he is, you don't have to like him, but yes, John, that's right. Rock and roll all night and party every day. That's what I'm talking about. The rock and roll freaking anthem of all time. It's got to be the number one rock anthem of all time. But as far as whether you like Gene Simmons or not, the dude is a marketing genius. Uh, put the name Kiss on everything, and I mean everything from Kiss caskets you can be buried in. Uh, not Vinnie Paul, Dimebag Darrell's buried in a Kiss casket. To Kiss condoms, and everything in between. You know, so they knew how to market themselves. They knew how to make a dollar, and damn it, they made it. They 100% made it. So they're number four. Number three. Now, number three is an album, and I had a couple of albums that I could have picked from this band, but I think number three was the right one to pick. It's the 1977 release by this duo. They call themselves a band, and they had some recurring members in that band, but the band really came down to Donald Fagen and Walter Beckett. I'm talking about Steely Dan, and the album is Asia. Uh, you want to me, the foundation of that whole yacht rock movement. Now you had albums that came before, you had albums that came after, but Asia is such an incredible mixture of jazz, of blues, of rock, and the incredible musicianship of the guys in Steely Dan. Um, these guys were known perfectionists. Okay, um, and everything about the sound had to be right. Hits off of that include Asia, include Peg with Michael McDonald in the background. Just an amazing album. Steely Dan's an amazing band. A lot of you older guys might finally be able to get into it. You might have heard some Steely Dan back in the day, and you're like, "Nah, man, I'm too punk, I'm too metal." Settle down, settle your asses down. Now that you're in your 40s and your 50s, go back and listen to Steely Dan, and you'll be like, "Wow, you know what? This band really, really is awesome." Now that you've relaxed a little bit. Number two, and this was an album, debut album from a band that reset the needle for hard rock slash metal music, depending on where you want to land, what you want to call it. And I'm talking about the debut album of Van Halen. That first album, Running with the Devil. Uh, did that have the remake of Pretty Woman? I can't remember. I think it did. But that debut album, woo, wow! You talk about a reset in American rock and roll, going from prog rock, going from arena rock to saying, give me the damn guitar and let's reset this. Um, uh, that album, and anybody who was around at that time, you could look back. I mean, today, those of you who didn't, who weren't around and have always had that debut album, can't understand the significance of that album when you throw it in the middle of of Kiss Dynasty. What a great album. Kiss Finds Disco. That's a whole other story. What's up, Ken? But you can't understand the significance of when you have the Foreigners and the Bostons and the Styx, all great bands. Okay, the Electric Light Orchestras, um, all great bands, all rock bands, but they had no umph. They had no umph. And the metal bands that you had at the time were metal. You know, they were the Judas Priests and the Saxons and bands like that. So what Van Halen did was it came out and it gave you some shit that just rocked, but was fun. It was fun. There was nothing about Judas Priest in the 70s that was fun. It was good, but it sure as hell wasn't fun. But when you heard Eddie playing and David Lee Roth's voice, his singing, oh yeah, I'm running one time, all those little things that he would put in there, those little yells, and it was just fun. But the music fucking rocked. It reset. It reset rock and roll. What we would consider today is rock and roll. Um, what an amazing, amazing, amazing album. So before I go to the number one, now remember these are in no particular order, but the number one album, essential album of the other essential albums of the 70s. Let's go with since we got quite a bit of time here, and I want to hear your albums, guys. Throw me some of your albums there that you think are essential 70s albums. And if they're not in the top 10, if they're not Fleetwood Mac Rumors, if they're not Dark Side of the Moon, if they're not Led Zeppelin 4 or Physical Graffiti, um, we could talk about them a little bit. I got a little bit of time. I'm not ready to go to number one yet. Um, there are other albums which I think, uh, you know, have deserve to be mentioned. Um, Grateful Dead's American Beauty uh, is an album that incorporates their jam music um, with bluegrass country elements, and you can hear it start to make that turn. You know, I believe I don't have my list in front of me, but I believe American Beauty um, is the one that's got Casey Jones on it, or it's got Truckin', one or the other. But you could hear that kind of that little bit of country twangy feel to those songs that didn't exist before. Um, Joy Division's first album, again I mentioned earlier, um, where we see the birth of goth. You know, if you guys know, if you guys can remember emo, emo's the bastard grandchild of goth. You know, it's the dark eyeliner and the black clothing, um, but instead of just but with a whole lot of self-loathing is what emo is. But yeah, there's a direct line from the goth of the late 70s and early 80s right to the emo of the 2000s. Um, so you get that, Alice Cooper's Billion Dollar Babies, Kiss's Destroyer, um, The Grand Illusion by Styx, uh, Billy Joel's The Stranger. You want to talk about a monumental album? There's several by Elton John, including my personal favorite, which is "Don't Shoot Me, I'm Just a Piano Player." But you've also got Caribou. You've also got "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road," Captain Fantastic and the Dirt Brown Cowboys, Kiss Dynasty, Again, Kiss being introduced, Kiss introducing a disco element to their music, so it had a little more boogie to it. Um, some of it was actually danceable, played in discos. The song "I Was Made for Loving You," which everybody hated at the time, but now has become one of the most famous and most beloved Kiss songs um, that got played at every concert after that. Um, uh, Fleetwood Mac's debut album is an album that people mark as a hold on, that's my let's say oh, okay, that's my glucose monitor telling me, hey, your blood sugar's high. Um, Fleetwood Mac wasn't just rumors. The album Tusk, which I believe came out in 1980, um, 79, around that era, uh, was a big mover for them. Their self-titled album. They were another band, uh, very blues based in the late 60s and early 70s. They had a shift in their lineup, and then all of a sudden they bring in Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, and they put out the album Fleetwood Mac, and they go in a whole nother way. Genesis. Yeah, thank you, honey. I heard it. My wife was telling me that she could hear the beep 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 beep. Was going to come over here to point at it, be like, um, but Genesis with their album Abacab and Duke, again also going a more pop route after coming off as a prog band. Speaking of prog bands, Yes is Fragile um, cements them in that prog era with the incredible bass playing of Chris Squire, probably one of the greatest and most underrated bass players of all time. Because a lot of people don't want to listen to prog, um, but if you're a bass player and you listen to Yes and listen to the bass lines done by Chris Squire, it will change your life. 100%. It will change your life. Right there, right straight above me, Rush 2112, the album that was their make or break album. They were either going to make it big or they were going to go away. And thanks to some DJ in Ohio who heard something from him and played it, the band took off and became uh, one of the biggest rock bands of all time, Hall of Famers, um, just an incredible band. All of these are various albums, and I want to hear some from you guys. I got Ken who mentioned Dynasty, um, Ike who mentioned Iggy and the Stooges. They're another punk rock band. John mentioned Rumors, where he talked about them. Ike also mentioned the Dead Boys. So let's hear what bands you guys are thinking about from the '70s before I go and recap uh, 4-2. I mean 5-2, and then hit you up with the number one album on this list of the other essential classic rock albums. Um, Other honorable mentions include the B-52s' first album, um, Deep Purple and Rock We Trust, uh, Blondie, Eat to the Beat, The Who, Who's Next. The Who got a bunch in the '70s, just amazing. Thanks, Scott. But you got Quadrophenia, you got The Who, Who's Next, you've got Meaty Beatty, Big and Bouncy, uh, you got Who Are You, um, all great albums by one of the most amazing British invasion bands um, to come over in the '60s. Van Morrison's Moondance, Van Morrison, a great example of a person um, who you'll hear on classic rock stations all the time with with some of his songs and Moondance. That album, I believe. Tell me if I'm right, John. Moondance is the album that has Into the Mystic. It's my sister's wedding song, and it's like a bunch of people's wedding. Incredible song. I think it's on that album, but I'm not sure. Um, so yeah, keep them coming. Give me a couple more of these '70s essential albums from the '70s that you think people should be listening to, that they need to really give it a shot. ACDC, for those about to rock. No, excuse me, that came out in the '80s. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, with their original singer Bon Scott. That that's an incredible album. Um, Foreigner, their debut album, uh, amazing. Heart, uh, Little Queenie, Little Queen, amazing album. And I believe Dog and Butterfly also came out in the '70s. Another amazing album by them, by the Wilson sisters. Bob, Crosby, Stills, Nash and One, Four-Way Street. Um, I don't know if I know that album. I know the album So Far. I know the album. Of course, I can't think of it. It's got the brown cover. Um, uh, and I will say Neil Young's Harvest Moon, definitely, definitely an amazing album from the '70s. That if you ever get a chance, a lot more mellow. If you're a rocker, you know, it's a good Sunday afternoon listen. You know, as you're trying to as you're winding down, you're quieting out um uh, from from a hell of a week. Um, amazing album, Harvest Moon, and also song album came out in 1970. A lot of people don't might not think, they think of it as a '60s album. Maybe they think they came out in '69, but it actually came out after her death in 1970, and it's Pearl by Janis Joplin. It's the one that gave us me and Bobby McGee, Chris Christopherson cover. Um, that is just just an amazing album. Atlanta Rhythm Section. I'm not sure which album, unless you just mean the one that's ARS. Uh, they're a great band. Offhand, though, I can't think of any of their albums, and that I think that'll stand out. One of the things I tried to stay away from when I was thinking about this list was staying away from greatest hits albums, because if you bring out a greatest hits, anybody can go in there. And I know Atlanta Rhythm Section is one of those bands that, uh, me personally, I think if I got the greatest hits, I got everything I need. That's what I think. When I'm thinking of listening to an album, I'm thinking of some of the deep cuts that fill out, you know, that fill out the catalog. If you look at Electric Light Orchestra, their album Out of the Blue, everyone knows the song Telephone. Is it Telephone Line? Oh, telephone line. Give me some time. That one, right? That's on that album. Turn to Stones on that album, but it's also got deeper cuts like Wild West Hero. That if you hear that album, you're like, wow, this is oh, um, but if you were to get uh, uh, so you're saying Atlanta Rhythm, Joe's saying Atlanta Rhythm Section, I'm not gonna let it bother me tonight, 1977. I guess that's the name of the album. Okay, cool. And Bob, who mentioned Crosby, Stills, Nash won four way, it says it's one of their live double albums, one of his favorites. Again, I never liked live albums when I was younger. Uh, I really got to appreciate them after I started going to concerts regularly, which would be in the 2000s. Um, uh, but there were some bands. I mentioned Kiss, but there were bands like uh, like Cheap Trick live at Boudica or Peter Frampton, Frampton Comes Alive, where those live albums are what made those careers. They had albums before. They had played with bands before. You know, Peter Frampton was with Canned Heat. Uh, Cheap Trick had put out a couple bands, but it wasn't until they put out those live albums that people were just like, "Holy shit, these guys! These guys are amazing," and their careers really took off. So I personally have seen Crosby, Stills, Nash. Never young, but I saw Crosby, Stills, and Nash 5 times um, throughout my life. While David Crosby was still alive, and they were bands that really, really were good live if you got to see them. John says topics like this make me hate the fact that I got rid of my album tape and massive CD collection decades ago. I did too. I got rid of everything, and then I started to buy it back. And what I will tell you to do is don't. I've got 4,700 albums. I got a collection that would cost me like 3 grand a month to insure. Um, at $200, uh, I think it was no, yeah, $200 per $10,000 worth. Was it? No, it was 20. Excuse me, $20 for every $10,000. But I've got a collection that's worth about $200,000. So yeah, you figure it out. It's $20. $20 for every 10,000. $200-300 a month just with what I got. So yeah, don't, John, miss it. You can be angry about it, but if you end up becoming obsessed like me, I mean, Justin Kiss, Elvis, Beatles, David Bowie, and Grateful Dead, I've probably got 200 albums just in those 5 artists. Um, so yeah, it gets, you know. Um, However, if you're like me and you want the ability to play the music whenever you want, but you can't do it streaming, I don't care what they say, because all the artists, all the streaming service has to do is we're not playing this band. We lost our deal with them. And think about it, when streaming started, the Beatles weren't on streaming. So if you got rid of all of your Beatles records, you couldn't hear them. You literally couldn't unless the radio played them because you couldn't stream them. So imagine that. For a lot of you, you don't care, but for a lot of people to never be able to hear a Beatles song again, that's pretty devastating. So let's go back, recap 5 through 2. I get ready to mention my number one, and number one is really going to shock you guys. I really think so. So number 5, Devo, Are We Not Men? Uh, Question: Are we not men? Answer: We are Devo. That's the name of it. Kiss, their first live album, Kiss Alive. Steely Dan, Asia, was number 3, and number 2, that debut album, self-titled, from Van Halen. Um, I gotta take a look. Bob, yeah, Bob gave me a bunch of albums when I was starting up my collection as he was moving in and getting rid of some stuff, and I'm sure it is, which means I'm sure it's somewhere in the I don't know 200 cubicles I have, like 200 cubicles I have like that are full of albums or whatever it is. I don't know. I got probably about 150 cubicles, seriously. So the number one album, which was released in 1978, another post-punk slash new wave band that didn't fit in a category, and yet were influenced by genres of music that people never thought about. Well, the average person never did, but this band obviously did. And we're talking about The Police and Outlandish D'Amour, an album that kind of really introduced the world to what I like to call white boy reggae, which is music done by white artists with an obvious reggae influence. The Clash had a lot of that feel. Songs like Police and Thieves, which had that, bam, bam, bam. Alanis D'Amour, which featured I Can't Stand Losing You, but more importantly featured the song that put him on the map, which was Roxanne. Roxanne, bam, bam, bam. You don't have to put on the red light, bam. But you had that reggae guitar that was in there. Introduced a lot of people to that feel. And again, yeah, the Clash did it too. And the Clash. By the way, the Clash is London Calling, Essential. Sandinista, I also think came out in '79. Might have came out in '80, but those essential albums. So let's run down the top 10 again real quick, or the 10 that I listed. Number 10 at number 10, Sex Pistols. Never mind the Bullocks, '77. At 9, George Harrison's 1970 classic, All Things Must Pass. At number 8. Coming out in '71, Alice Cooper, Love It to Death. At number 6, Pink Floyd's Ode to Syd Barrett, their founder, with Wish You Were Here. Oh, no, yeah, sorry, skipped over number 7. Number 7, the debut album from Boston, self-titled, Boston 6 was Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here. Number 5, Devo, with their electronic futuristic sound with Q, Are We Not Men? A, We Are Devo. 4, Kiss and Alive, coming out in '76. 3, the mellow jazz rock of Steely Dan in Asia. Number 2, putting American rock back on the map, Van Halen in 1978 with their self-titled. And the number 1 on this list, no particular order, was The Police, Outlandish D'Amour. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of this 10 other essential albums from the '70s? Do you think it's a solid list? If I could only, if you could only mention 10 albums from the '70s, essential, other than The Usual Suspects, what would you put on there? Would you put on The Clash? Would you put on Styx, Pieces of 8? Would you put on Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street? Would you put on Canned Heat? I can't think of the name of the album, but someone's got 30 Days in the Hole in it. Would you put on Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run? Thanks, John. Boss, one of the greatest debut albums of all time, a near perfect album. And I'm glad you could, Bob. Things that I didn't mention. I didn't mention any Allman Brothers. Talk about another band where a live album really took them over the top, and it was Live at the Fillmore. That version of Whipping Post. Oh my God! Oof. Greg Allman on the vocals on that. But I didn't mention I didn't mention Leonard Skinner's Second Helping. when you talk about a perfect side one to an album, there isn't a miss on that side one, and another near perfect album. Anyway, second helping. Um, I didn't mention any of the Sabbath albums. You know, Masters of Reality, uh, Sabbath 4, um, Heaven and Hell. I didn't mention any of the early Rush albums. You know, Fly by Night, their debut album, Permanent Waves, which I believe came out in '79. Uh, you know, so many incredible albums that get overlooked when we talk about the top 10 albums of the '70s. You know, and these are albums that you can make a case for. So, what are some of the albums you think should have been mentioned? If I didn't mention them, you know, um, I'm glad that you guys were able to enjoy this list. Um, but I want to know some of the other albums that could have been on here. Carole King's Tapestry, one of the greatest albums of all time. You know, overlooked. You know, Paul Simon. There goes Ryman Simon. Uh, uh, Another great album, considered by many classic rock. Um, so we get to expand what we look at um, when we look at the genre now that we call classic rock. Um, there's a lot of things that fit into it. A lot of things that fit into it. So we get to kind of expand, you know, and it opens up to a lot of stuff. A bunch of John Lennon solo albums. I'm just looking around here to see what I got that I might be able to. Joe Walsh, his stuff with the James Gang. Oh my God, that stuff was some good Southern rock stuff. Um, uh, let's see, Sly and the Family Stone. Woo! Hotel California was in the list of the 10 essential albums, so that's why I didn't mention that one. But if you want to mention, you know, take it to the limit, um, uh, sure as hell can, because that was a great album by him. Let's see what else we got here. Dire Straits came out in the '80s, so I can't mention them. Ted Nugent. Did L.A. Woman come out in the '70s? John, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna have you. Okay, give me a thumbs up. So I'm saying okay. L.A. Woman by the Doors. Uh, he's saying that again. I just said Sly and the Family Stone. Band on the Run by Paul McCartney and Wings. What a great album. And Paul McCartney, who continued his run of hits as he left, not only the most was considered the most essential rock band of all time, but he left an incredible writing partner. You know, it was always Lennon and McCartney, and now it just became McCartney without Lennon. Um, uh, and he wrote quite a few number ones in the '70s as part of Wings and solo, because he also did do solo. McCartney, the album, the self-titled McCartney album, which has the recorded version of Maybe I'm Amazed. What a fucking great song. You want a beautiful love ballad. The the um uh, the recorded version of Maybe I'm Amazed by Paul McCartney. Beautiful. Play that for your loved one. Guys, play that for your ladies though. Oh my God! I love you so much. Oh, the way you express your love for me. What a oh God, I love that song. So anyway, I appreciate you guys throwing up some albums out there. Make sure that you guys honestly give these albums a listen. Albums, not songs. Remember, we didn't do songs. We can do songs next week if you want. some essential songs. Maybe we'll do essential one-hit wonders. Make you guys do a little bit of thinking. The Cars, honey, you putting the Cars? Did their first album come out in 1979? Because that's another great rock band that kind of gets lumped into new wave a little bit. But yeah, that album just yeah, it did, because just what I needed. It was in 1979, and Dire Straits' first album with Sultans of Swing. Both of those come out in 1979. Yeah, yeah. I didn't mention Elvis Costello either. Elvis Costello and the Attractions. My Aim Is True. Amazing album. Amazing album. That is really going to wrap it up for me. As you see me getting a little fidgety, that's because I'm diabetic and when I gotta go to the bathroom, I gotta go. So I'm gonna cut it early this week, guys. Thank you for participating, for being part of the discussion. I love when we get to talk music, and I love talking to you guys. I don't know if Paul McCartney was in a band before Wings. Hey, it all depends on when he came out. I remember when McCartney went on what was it, the Grammys, and did that song with Kanye West, and people were saying, man, it's nice of Kanye to give that old dude a shine, like Paul McCartney needed Kanye at the time for anything, So anyway, I love you guys. Make sure you hit the reaction button so I know that you were here, and I will see you guys next week. Until then, to my kids, if you ever listen to this, just know Daddy loves you. Take care, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye. And yes, I did mention Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. What a fucking fantastic double album by Elton John. All right. Bye, guys.